him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Welcome back to On the Spot. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 6 of Welcome Back, Kotter. No more Mr. Nice Guy. The IMDb summary is Mr. Woodman and Mr. Kotter reverse roles. Mr. Woodman starts being nice to the sweat hogs, and Mr. Kotter starts being mean to them. This first aired on October 14th, 1975. Bob Lehendro directed again, but this time the writer is George Yanuck. He was born in 1938 in Bristol, Connecticut, and he died in 2022. His first writing credit was for The Jimmy Rogers Show in 1969, and he did mostly write for variety shows, including but he also wrote for some sitcoms, including the second episode of The Bob Newhart Show. He did Sanford and Son, First and 10, Too Close for Comfort, and Out of This World. This was his first of 8 scripts for Welcome Back, Kotter, including another of my favorites that we'll get to eventually. In the cold opening, Gabe is sitting on the couch and Julie is in a rocking chair that I don't remember from earlier episodes. She asks why his mother has never liked her. And this is just out of the blue, another one of these conversations they have. And of course we learned on the Whodunit episode that his mother is pressuring them to have kids. Gabe says his mother likes her, but she was never too crazy about any of the girls he went out with. They were always too fat, too skinny, too short, too tall, too loud, or too quiet. Julie nods. Gabe says he finally found a girl exactly like his mother. She looked like her, talked like her, walked like her, and had the same personality. Unfortunately, his father hated her. We always start out with a joke, but this one may have elements of truth. And yes, it's kind of odd to picture Kotter with an ex-girlfriend who was like his mother, although of course we don't meet his mother, if I remember correctly, just his father. Scene 1 is set in the hallway, and there's quite a bit of the hallway in this episode. Arnold is in the background talking with one of the female extras, and she's brunette. She has him hold up a mirror. When he steps forward to join the main action, the male extra who's got long hair and a cap takes the mirror and helps her primp for the rest of the scene. But when I was first watching this, I thought it was a magnifying glass and they were helping her check for zits. So it's just this odd little background action. Juan, Freddie, Vinny, and Rosalie are in the foreground doing something with cards. Like it looks like they're going to play a card game, but it's hard to tell what. Most of them look very denim-y, except for Freddie has a red track jacket and a red and orange t-shirt. Mr. Woodman comes over and asks Juan what he's done with it. Juan says he's clean, meaning not guilty, and Vinny backs him up. And then Juan shows a tooth necklace, just one tooth on a string, and he says he had it since birth. It was the first tooth he ever knocked out of anybody. Freddie is very amused. So we're still getting Juan being violent, apparently from the first day he was alive, implying that he has knocked out many people's teeth. And I don't know if it was the doctor's tooth. We don't get any more information. Kotter enters and talks briefly to a fluffy-haired male extra and I think a new black female extra. She seemed different than the one, at least in the last couple episodes. The audience applauds his entrance. He joins the group in the foreground. Mr. Woodman yells at Epstein, accusing him of stealing yellow chalk, his favorite. Freddie and Juan look confused. Vinny looks very amused, while Rosalie mouths, "Yellow is his favorite?" Kotter is surprised at Mr. Woodman accusing Epstein of being a thief. He tells him to look at that face, so there's a close-up of Juan's mischievous smile. And Kotter, of course, should know that Juan does not look innocent, and he does have a history of crime. The adults step aside as Woodman tells Kotter not to defend them. He's sick of their taunts, sick of their contempt, sick of them flouting his authority, sick of them. Rosalie is now resting her hand on Juan's shoulder, and she says, "There's no doubt about it, the man is sick." Juan agrees. He says that Mr. Woodman reminds him of the girls' gym teacher they found talking to a volleyball. Another mention of a teacher we'll never see. Arnold laughs, which makes Juan grin. The bell rings, so Freddie tells Woodman it's time for them to boogie. There is quite a bit about boogieing in this episode, and we're still technically pre-disco, so it's more sort of like boogie, like get a move on, I guess. The song Boogie Oogie Oogie, by the way, wouldn't come out until 1978. Woodman tells the students, "Well then, boogie, you pack of howling baboons." The 5 of them boogie into the classroom, and they look kind of like the Keep on Trucking guy. They're slouched back with their fingers in the air. Feels more like 60s or maybe early 70s than late 70s. They go into the classroom in single file, so it's Juan, then Rosalie, Freddie, Vinny, and Arnold gives a quick look back. There's understandably laughter and applause. I'll just mention right now that in contrast to the Whodunit episode where it was Rosalie versus most of the guys, not counting Arnold, she is sort of the fifth sweat hog in this episode, and it's an interesting dynamic. Not exactly one of the guys, but definitely a part of things. And that's closer to what we got in the debate episode where she wore the cheerleader outfit, although she didn't get to be on the debate team. Kotter asks Mr. Woodman if he's okay. He wonders if there was too much chipped beef in the cafeteria. I assume that this was after lunch and they're getting ready to go into the social studies class, so homeroom of course would be in the morning. Then Kotter says forget about the chalk. Mr. Woodman doesn't seem himself. Woodman says that he's more himself than ever. I'll mention right now that there's a lot about identity in this episode, in the self. Kotter suggests that Woodman try being less himself than ever. He says that a person is like a car. We have to be finely tuned. He puts his hand on Woodman's shoulder and says, Mr. Woodman, you need a lube job. He doesn't say it suggestively, but it was one of many times I laughed out loud during this episode. Kotter tells Woodman he's got to relax a little. Forget about Buchanan. Woodman sits on the bench and Kotter tells him to go out, have a few drinks, a nice dinner, some quiet conversation with friends. Woodman says, good advice, Kotter. Thank you. What time? Gabe's smile fades. As it turns out that Woodman thought this was a dinner invitation over to Gabe's place. Kotter suggests, how about August? We don't know when this is set, but I assume the fall, so it's about as far from August as we can get. There's applause as we fade to the next scene. Then it's presumably that evening. Kotter's in jeans and a sweater, so relatively casually dressed compared to how he's usually in a suit and tie at school. The doorbell buzzes rather than rings. Julie joins him at the door. She's in a long-sleeve black top and a very long skirt with black, gray, and pink. He tells her that years from now, they're going to look back on this and laugh, so neither of them is looking forward to this evening. He opens the door and Woodman steps in. He speaks quickly about how he knew Kotter hoped he wouldn't come, and he babbles a bit. The audience applauds. Kotter looks at his watch and says, well, it is getting late. Julie touches Woodman's hand and says that they're delighted that he could come. She always tries to be nice. And this is the first episode where Mr. Woodman and Julie meet, and they will have an interesting dynamic over the years. In this episode, he is definitely her husband's boss, and she is friendly but somewhat formal with him, calling him Mr. Woodman, and he calls her Mrs. Kotter. By the fourth season, he will refer to her as Julie, although I believe she still continues to call him Mr. Woodman. He hands her a bouquet and says, don't worry, he'll leave early. He gets defensive when Gabe wants to take his coat. So very clearly, Mr. Woodman is not used to going to people's houses, does not know anything about the etiquette of being a guest. Or maybe he's just really suspicious of Gabe, even though Gabe is his host. Gabe hangs the coat in the closet and leaves the door open so Woodman can keep an eye on it at all times. Julie suggests Gabe make a drink or two, or 6, before dinner. Gabe says he'll fix a screwdriver to tighten up whatever is loose in Mr. Woodman, although of course they're trying to loosen him up. They have an ice bucket, a pitcher of orange juice, and a couple bottles on the table or chest that's behind the couch. They have a very small apartment. It's not like they have a bar that they can go fix drinks at. There's quick applause. Woodman puts his hands on his lapels, and he's got a different suit from the earlier scene. It's gray. He starts walking around the apartment as he says that in his entire career, he's been invited to faculty members' homes only twice, and apparently he accepted both times. The first time was during World War II. They wanted his meat ration points. That's a joke I got as a kid in the 70s. I don't know if that would have to be explained to a modern kid. The second time was a few years ago during the tuna fish scare. They had tuna casserole, and everyone waited for him to taste it first. There's brief laughter and applause. So it's like the other teacher that invited him over didn't really like him, but wanted to use him as a food taster. He asked Julie what's for dinner, but Gabe jokes that it's tuna casserole. I honestly thought that they were going to lead into the running joke that would go, I think, through at least a couple seasons about how Julie makes terrible tuna casserole, but no, it's just a coincidence. Woodman looks shocked. Kotter says he was just kidding and he made a joke. He gives Woodman and Julie their drinks. Julie takes a sip. Gabe slips his hand around her waist while still holding his own drink in his other hand. And so this is another episode where we get to see them be mildly affectionate in front of other people. And yeah, they're probably still newlyweds. Woodman says, so, you actually live here? And he doesn't say it in a rude way. Presumably he's never been in an apartment this small. Gabe says they have a townhouse on Park Avenue. They just borrow this place from a struggling teacher and his wife when they want to entertain. And Julie grins, because of course they are the struggling teacher and wife. Woodman says he had a place like this, but it burned. Doesn't say burned down, just that it burned. Julie says that's too bad, but at least it made it easy for him to move. So Julie, again trying to be the optimist. Woodman says, who moved? And he says he just stayed at the Y until the furniture cooled. The Cotters look at each other in surprise. Then Woodman smiles a little and says that was a joke. The Cotters smile at him making a joke, and then Julie makes a face like, you didn't exaggerate about this guy, to Gabe. Woodman takes a sip and says he's beginning to relax. Possibly the alcohol is helping. He sits on the couch and asks Kotter what's troubling him. Kotter joins him on the couch and says that Woodman is what's troubling him. Woodman crosses his arms and admits he made a fool out of himself in the hallway. Then he goes into what I can only call a soliloquy about chalk. So again, John Sylvester White's dramatic background. My favorite line was, the meaningless sticks of compressed dust. At the end, there's a cut to Gabe with a, hoo boy, face. Woodman says to Gabe, I'm not well liked, am I? Gabe looks over at Julie with a help me face. So she comes over, pats Gabe's arm, and says it's time for dinner. She closes the closet door so that she can get to the mini fridge, because again, it's a very small apartment. The men go over to the table, which has a brown tablecloth, brown napkins rolled up with brown napkin holders, yellow plates, yellow glasses, yellow salt and pepper shakers, and yellow butter on a brown plate. Gabe says he'll taste the food first, meaning that he will be the food taster. The men sit, and Julie comes over with brown bowls of salad, so they are really committed to their theme of yellow and brown dinner. Woodman says the students like Gabe. He's got rapport. But what did they think of Woodman? So he keeps trying to get the truth. But when Gabe tries to tell him, he keeps interrupting him. After Julie sits in the middle chair, Woodman says that he'll start, meaning start on what the students think of him. They think he's ill-tempered and insensitive. Gabe says that's a good start. Woodman adds petty and tyrannical. Gabe, with his mouth full, adds hostile. Woodman says unreasonable. Gabe says mean. Woodman says rotten, but when Julie cheerfully echoes that, he gets offended and stands. She clutches his arm and apologizes. He sinks back down again and admits he is rotten. Gabe says he's not rotten, and he himself would have stopped at petty and tyrannical. Gabe says all Woodman has to do is loosen up a little bit. Stop and smell the roses. Woodman says, in Brooklyn? So Kotter suggests stop and smell a few winos. When I was doing my More Committee podcast, there would occasionally be jokes about winos, basically drunks in public, possibly unhoused. And it was a little bit hard to believe in Boulder. I definitely could picture it in Brooklyn. Gabe says that Woodman has to get back to his first love, teaching. So this is the episode where we find out that Woodman was not always just in administration. He used to be a teacher. Gabe says that Woodman may have his weaknesses, but he tells Julie that this man is one terrific history teacher. Both Julie and Woodman smile. Gabe says Woodman, who's now eating the salad, is the greatest. Nobody could teach about military history like this man right over here. Julie gives Woodman's shoulder a quick friendly rub. Woodman says there was always something about a good war that cheered him up. We'll find out much later that Woodman writes a novel about the Civil War. This is a consistent character trait. Gabe says he was probably seeing those people with guns and knowing they're not in your neighborhood. Julie says Gabe's right. Mr. Woodman should get back to teaching. Woodman thinks this is ridiculous. He wouldn't know where to start. He hasn't taught class in 10 years. So I wonder, since Gabe was 16 10 years ago, maybe at that time Woodman was his history teacher. They had their clashes, but Gabe did recognize that Woodman was a good teacher. And then at some point he moved into administration. And this, by the way, is the episode where we find out that he is the vice principal, although earlier they said that he was the principal. And in fact, we'll start to learn about the principal, who we never see, but I'll get to that. Gabe insists that Woodman teach Kotter's class tomorrow, and he says the students are not going to bite him. Woodman seriously says he has been bitten by sweat hogs on many occasions. Then they all smile because he's made another joke. They all toast as we fade out to the next scene. It's presumably the next day, because Kotter has a surprise. Mr. Woodman has agreed to teach the class. Freddie looks amused, and Arnold points and says, him? And then he does his laugh. The student with the cap, who from this point out I'm going to refer to as Cap Boy, is behind Arnold, and he's so amused that he sticks out his tongue and claps. Kotter takes the empty seat in the front row between Freddie and Juan. He says today think of him as just another sweat hog. So Woodman comes over and tells him no horseplay, and he wants him to sit up straight. Kotter obeys. Woodman smiles and says he's still got it. He tells the boys and girls to take out their notebooks and pencils. He asks Kotter if he remembers everything and doesn't have to take notes, being that kind of sarcastic teacher. Kotter takes a little notebook out of the inner pocket of his green jacket. He turns around and asks Horshack to lend him a pencil, but Horshack says, "Sorry, no loansies." And he says, "Mr. Kotter, I'm surprised at you. Don't you know you're supposed to come to class with two," and he holds up two fingers, "sharpened pencils in case one breaks?" Now, I was a little kid at this point. We still used pencils in the 80s. You usually did not bring more than one unless you wanted to loan them out to people, although some kids did have like pencil cases with pens and pencils inside and erasers and so on. Kotter says, "You sound like my mother," meaning that she nags, I guess. Or used to tell him to take two pencils to school. Arnold says, "Mr. Kotter, there is no need to get surly." Kotter does his Groucho imitation and makes a pun on surly to bed, surly to rise. And this is his only celebrity imitation in this episode. So that was one of the reasons why this episode felt different. But of course, for much of it, Kotter is not exactly himself. Right now, he is regressing to his high school self, and then later, of course, we will see him become more like Mr. Woodman. Freddie silently hands Kotter a pencil. A guy in the back row who's got a light blue shirt has covered his face, maybe at Kotter's Groucho imitation. Mr. Woodman says they'll discuss the Revolutionary War. As he takes off his gray jacket, he asks who can tell him where that war started. He calls on Mr. Washington. Thought that was interesting, kind of formal. Freddie whispers to Kotter, "What's the answer?" Then he grins and crosses his arms, looking cool. The blue shirt boy looks very amused, and he also looks vaguely like Steve Guttenberg. Kotter whispers, "Lexington and..." So Freddie stands and says, "Lexington Avenue." And there's laughter and applause. This was filmed in LA, but people knew that Lexington Avenue is a street in New York City. It looks like it's on the east side of Manhattan. There's laughter and applause at Freddie's answer. Pointing, like in the direction of Lexington Avenue, he says probably 129th by that barbecue. It's a tough neighborhood. A lot of wars going on over there. Mr. Woodman says wrong and puts on a tall British colonial army helmet. He says it was Lexington and Concord. He gets out a small musket. He says that's where the colonists fired the shot heard round the world. And he fires the musket, which is sort of like a pop gun and not very loud, not really heard round the world. He puts on a red coat as he talks about the redcoats. He has Kotter lie in wait for him as a colonist with a tricorn hat and another musket, and he's hiding behind the hill, which is Kotter's desk. Woodman marches between the desks and then crouches by Arnold and a girl with brown hair. Not the girl from the hallway, since this one has a bob. Arnold raises his hand and, with one ooh, asks if he can be a prisoner. Woodman says maybe later. Woodman tells Kotter to fire at will. So with very New York delivery, Kotter complains about taxation without representation, and then he fires his musket. Woodman calls him a treasonous Yankee dog and fires, hitting Arnold, who gets up with his hands behind his head and surrenders. There's whistles and cheers as we fade to the next scene. Woodman is now wearing a George Washington wig and sitting at Kotter's desk. He says, and so, on June 16th, 1775, George Washington agreed to take command of the colonial army. This is as good a time as any to mention that this is definitely an episode that not only has a lot going on at school, but actually has a lot about school. And we actually get some historical information, so the NEA representative on the set probably was pretty happy. And 1775 was, of course, 200 years before this episode was filmed. And starting in 1975, we began to get bicentennial moments, gearing up for the big deal in 1976, and there would be these little PSAs on TV about little historical moments and so on. This is very much of its time. I think they deliberately chose the Revolutionary War to have this be the lesson. Plus, it's fun to see Woodman in costumes based on 200 years earlier, and now 250 years. Woodman sighs as if he's worn out. We can see various costume pieces on the desk and hanging from the bulletin board, so presumably he went through all these characters and acted out the whole war. The class applauds. Arnold even gets to his feet. The four main sweat hogs, Rosalie and what I will now refer to as Bob Girl, because she's got the bobbed hair, come over to the desk. Vinny hates to admit it, but that was interesting, really. He shakes Woodman's hand. One says that Woodman looks like the guy on the money. You would think that he would know Washington's name, considering he's good friends with Freddie, but okay. Woodman smiles and nods. Rosalie says it was terrific, and in a catty way she adds that Mr. Kotter doesn't do that many costume changes in class, and she looks over her shoulder at Kotter. Mr. Woodman is glad they all enjoyed it. He tells them to wait till they see the fun they'll have with World War II. So is he not coming back for the Civil War, the War of 1812, Spanish-American War? I don't know. Maybe that's just his big finale. The students sound like they're looking forward to it. As the students file out, Arnold tells Woodman he was really great. I will note the order that they leave in. Vinny, Juan, Blue Shirt Guy, Rosalie, the new black girl, Arnold, Cap Boy, fluffy-haired guy, Bob girl, the white girl with the longer hair, possibly the hallway girl, and Freddie. So 11 total, and that's the same number as in the later scene where they file out, but not in that order. This class size fluctuates, but it's not unusual to have this be just under a dozen. When the students are gone, Woodman says that they loved him, and then Judy Borden races through the open door. She's wearing a brown top and a tan vest, and her arms are full of books and notebooks. She calls to Mr. Kotter, then she sees Mr. Woodman. She says, "Mr. Kotter, why is he wearing Miss Fishbeck's hair?" I can't do her accent, but just great delivery on that. And of course, another reference to poor homely Miss Fishbeck, who apparently wears a wig. Before anyone can explain to her, she tells Woodman that he's got to do something. So she came into Kotter's classroom. We'll find out it's because it's about the sweat hogs, but she sees Mr. Woodman as more of an authority figure because he is the vice principal. She says that the sweat hogs just locked Todd Ludlow in a gym locker. And I wasn't sure, but it looked like they were looping the name of Todd Ludlow. We don't see Todd in this episode, but viewers at home would have met him on the debate episode. We know that he and Judy are friends, and they are the annoying smart kids. That aside, I need to break this down, because the sweat hogs just locked Todd Ludlow in a gym locker. Did Judy go into the boys' gym, or did she hear about it? And what does she mean by they just did it? It's only been 10 seconds since Vinny left the room. Maybe she heard Todd yelling. She went to the doorway of the boys' locker room. He told her to get help, and he said he had been locked in there by the sweat hogs, and she assumed it just happened, but probably it had to have happened before class. And this is a class that was long enough for Woodman to reenact the Revolutionary War. Judy says, "And I don't know how long he can last in there with Epstein's socks." It's Epstein's locker, which we will hear more about shortly. And also, I guess they thought that Epstein would have the dirtiest feet. Somehow, Barbarino's socks just isn't as funny. And she looks and sounds utterly disgusted, which makes sense, because it is disgusting, but also just very in character for her. And then she exits. That's her entire appearance in the episode. It is enough to get her name into the closing credits. Once again, Helene Lembeck nails this character. She is so in the zone. Even just having a few moments of her is fun. Woodman just sits there with a dreamy smile. Kotter points and says, "Did you hear her, Mr. Woodman? They locked Todd Ludlow in a locker." But Woodman is still in a reverie. Kotter can see the headlines. Vice Principal wears wig while socks smother student. And of course it would have been more alliterative to put in Woodman wears wig while socks smother student. But I guess they want to emphasize that he's the vice principal. And I assume that this is the headline in the school newspaper. There's laughter and applause and a snippet of the theme song as Woodman takes off the wig and stands. But he doesn't go out to check on Todd. Instead, he and Kotter start putting away the costume pieces in a cardboard box. Presumably Todd is let out at some point. He's just going to have to hang in there with Epstein's socks for now. And then we have scene 5, and we're back in the hallway. There are 4 extras in the foreground. Bobbed hair girl is talking to Cap Boy, while the other 2 white boys are talking to each other. Then Kotter is talking to Rosalie and Freddie over by the classroom door. Woodman enters and cheerfully wishes the children and Kotter a good morning. And it's interesting, in this episode where he's trying to be nice to them, he calls them the children and boys and girls. So it's not exactly infantilizing, but sort of like if he sees them as children, then they're not juvenile delinquents, I guess. It's good morning. This is presumably before school starts. Kotter goes over to him and wishes him a good morning, so Woodman says it's a beautiful morning. Then the angle of the shot changes so that we can see a loudspeaker on the wall near the classroom door, and we zoom in on it as Principal Lazarus addresses whoever has disconnected the bell. And I think that they chose the name Lazarus because of the biblical story of how he was raised from the dead. And I think it's also sort of implying that he's boring. But yeah, we never see him. We do hear from and about him. This is his first episode, just this voiceover. But he will get to do a bit more later. The angle changes again, so now that we can see the other white female extra has joined Rosalie and Freddie over by the door, and the black girl comes in at some point. I forget when. Principal Lazarus says that the person who disconnected the bell has this first period to reconnect it. Rosalie and Freddie briefly look at each other, and then she tries to look innocent while he grins. So we know that they at least are in on this, and probably the rest of the Sweat Hogs. Principal Lazarus says, in the meantime, get to your classes. Ding dong. The Sweat Hogs are very amused. Woodman is frowning with his arms crossed, and again, you might think, oh, now he's going to go back to old Woodman, but for the moment, he's unhappy. The audience laughs and applauds, and I think because of the delivery, I don't know who the voice actor is, Lazarus, but how he said ding dong. The students enter the classroom, and Kotter is about to follow, but Woodman stops him. He smiles and thanks Kotter for letting him take his class yesterday, so it is the next morning. He says, bless you, Kotter, and he hugs him. So those are both very uncharacteristic. Kotter says, Mr. Woodman, don't you think you should take me out a few times first? Implying that Woodman is coming on to him, although, of course, we're not meant to take this seriously. Then Arnold appears by the lockers and says, oh, at the sight of Woodman hugging Kotter. As far as I can recall, there are no gay characters officially on Welcome Back, Kotter. Ron Palillo was gay, and he had a long-term partner for 41 years, but this would not have been common knowledge in the 70s. And his character was always presented as straight, although sometimes twisted sexuality, I guess you could say. Like when he did the heavy breathing phone call to Judy Borden. But of course, it's just a joke, the idea that Mr. Woodman and Kotter could be doing anything romantic together. And how Kotter decides to salvage the situation is he pretends he's giving Mr. Woodman dance lessons for a wedding, which seems even shippier to me. He says the cha-cha is different than the mambo, 50s type dancing. Arnold does his laugh and he goes into the classroom. Woodman pulls away. There's whistles and applause. Juan and Vinny enter the hallway, looking suspicious. Juan has a baggy striped gray sweater. So that right there, if you've seen a few episodes, should tip you off that something is going on, because usually Juan is in denim. Kotter stops him, and Vinny says, What? Kotter lifts Juan's sweater, revealing a tool belt. So he knew immediately that there was something suspicious under that sweater. Juan says they're on a junior achievement project for the telephone company. He and Vinny both smile. Juan is so good at lying and coming up with stories. He's very imaginative. Kotter says they wouldn't happen to know who disconnected the bell. Juan thinks it was probably the same guy who stuck Todd Ludlow in Juan's gym locker. It's part of the undesirable element here at Buchanan. Kotter yells that Epstein is the president of the undesirable element here at Buchanan. Both Juan and Vinny nod and smile. They're not offended. They're proud of that. Kotter tells them to go reconnect the bell, but Woodman says to never judge by appearances. Kotter must learn to trust these children. Trust is the very foundation of good student-teacher relationships. There are no bad boys, just bad teachers. I was trying to find the original of that quote. I thought, well, maybe that's from Boys Town. Apparently it's just a very common saying. The internet is crediting Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, but of course that came out in the 80s. But it does sound like a very 70s feel-good kind of philosophy of teaching. Woodman pats Vinny's shoulder and tells the boys to run along. They smile and thank him. But when Vinny walks away, the bell falls out of the back of his jeans or his jacket. He and Juan start to run off. Arnold, fluffy-haired guy, and Rosalie exit the classroom, kind of doing the boogie walk, because Arnold says that the class is over because they heard the bell when it fell on the floor. Kotter stops the other students from leaving. There's a fade to the next scene. Kotter has his jacket off and he's pacing at the back of the class. He's talking about who settled which colony. So again, a little bit of history here. He wants to know who settled New Jersey. Arnold raises his hand and does a few oohs, and then he asks if New Jersey is settled. I just want to note that this is not a really catchphrasey kind of episode. Some of the previous episodes to air had this more. Things are just lightly suggested. If this were a later episode, he would be doing the full-on ooh, ooh, ooh. And Vinny would have done more of the what and who stuff, but we just don't get that. Kotter says New Jersey has been settled for more than 250 years. One scoffs and says Kotter has never been to Newark on a Saturday night. He and Freddie laugh and high-five. Then all four of the main sweat hogs do some sort of boogity-boogity chant, and this may be related to the boogie thing that they were doing when they went into the classroom at the beginning of the episode. Kotter irritably says he knows they'd rather watch Mr. Woodman crash the Boston Tea Party, but some of us are here to learn. Vinny looks around and says, "Who?" which amuses the Gutenberg guy who's now in an orange shirt. Kotter is going to write on the blackboard, but he has to boogie to his desk to get some chalk. The four main sweat hogs go boogity again, making Rosalie and the not Gutenberg guy rock their heads along with them. And I think the black girl is chanting too. Kotter opens his top desk drawer and finds several boxes of Woodman's yellow chalk, so tying back to the beginning of the episode. One says they had to put it someplace. Arnold says it'd break Uncle Woody's heart if he thought they took it. This is the scene where we get the Uncle Woody nickname, and I don't know when that started or who said it, but of course not that much time has passed since Woodman taught the class. That was just yesterday. And I think that the earlier scene out in the hallway was right before homeroom because they said it was first period, and I think now this is the afternoon because Kotter is actually teaching about the colonies and settlements and so on. Kotter says, "So you want him to think that I took it?" Meaning that Woodman would think that Kotter took the chalk. Vinny says, "Sure, why not?" So they are very anarchic and amoral, I guess you could say, in this episode. Kotter wants to know who's responsible. 5 of them confess. One says it was his idea. Freddie says that he took the chalk. Rosalie opened the desk drawer. Vinny put the chalk inside, and Arnold is very amused as he confesses that he closed the drawer. And Rosalie and Catboy laugh. Kotter says they really stick together, and it looks like the whole class nods and says, "Mm-hmm." This is another of these early episodes where the class is united, and in this case, united in petty theft and pranks and whatever you want to call imprisoning Todd Ludlow with Epstein socks. By tomorrow morning, Kotter wants each of them to write a 500-word essay on how to be a human being. And they mutter about this while I'm thinking 500 words isn't that much. The Word document I have for this episode is 3,600 words. Vinny can't believe this. It's like The Exorcist. The movie The Exorcist came out in 1973, so Vinny probably would have been about 14, but I could picture him sneaking in to see it, and it was very popular and very controversial. Vinny is not saying that the devil has taken over Kotter. He thinks Woodman has taken over Kotter's body. And then he calls to the Woodman inside of Kotter, which amuses the not Gutenberg boy. Kotter says that he's in there, meaning in his body, by himself. And actually this is more like Freaky Friday, although that movie didn't come out for another couple years. The book came out in 1972, but it's more like a body/personality switching setup. Certainly not satanic possession. Vinny says that ever since they made nice with Uncle Woody, so again using that nickname, Kotter has been crawling up their backs. And I figured that was probably the clean way of saying that. Freddie thinks Kotter is jealous. Kotter scoffs at being jealous of Father Flanagan. So this is the second reference to Boys Town in the series. That's actually before Kotter's time, but he and the Sweat Hogs would have grown up seeing Boys Town on TV. Vinny says Kotter has been turning to a real louse, and the others agree. He's right, and Freddie's right. Kotter is jealous. I think that he felt like he was special because he's a former sweat hog and he was able to connect to this class in a way that no other teacher could. And then Mr. Woodman, of all people, came along and befriended them and taught them. Kotter starts yelling that this is his school and he's a school teacher, so he's the boss. Then the loudspeaker crackles and Principal Lazarus says he's still waiting to get his bell back. Ding dong. Like I said, I don't think this is first period. Apparently he waited until the afternoon to make another announcement about the missing school bell. And because Principal Lazarus went ding dong, Arnold says that they're saved by the bell and they start heading out. But Kotter pushes against Juan, which causes a ricochet effect back to Rosalie because everybody's kind of bunched together. Kotter says no one leaves until he says so. Woodman comes in, and Kotter makes even Uncle Woody sit down. Kotter yells that he's sick of their contempt and their disrespect, so this is an echo of Mr. Woodman earlier. He knows what they're trying to do, and then he ends up crazily protesting that nobody's going to make him crazy, and there's laughter and applause. Vinny confides to Arnold that he thinks they made Kotter crazy. Arnold nods. Woodman stands and goes over to Kotter. He puts one hand on Kotter's shoulder and the other on Kotter's wrist. He tells Kotter he's got to relax, loosen up. Kotter says he's not crazy. Woodman steps back a little. He says that Kotter needs to have a few drinks, a nice dinner, quiet conversation with friends. And now he's echoing Kotter's advice. But because he's Mr. Woodman, he adds, that is, if you have any left after that disgusting performance, which is much more of Mr. Woodman phrasing than Mr. Kotter. Like I said in an earlier episode, I don't know who Gabe's friends are other than Julie and his students. I don't think he's really friends with any of the other teachers. In a way, he's alienated several of his friends by that disgusting performance. Kotter shakes his head. Woodman says Kotter is beginning to sound like him before he became a great guy. They're pointing out the parallels and the swapping. Kotter wants Woodman to go back to being himself. Woodman says he's happy being not himself. Kotter says if Woodman isn't himself, then Kotter can't be himself. And then he's got to be somebody, so he became Woodman. Woodman asks how it feels, and Kotter says, terrible. Kotter says he's a better teacher than a disciplinarian, but the school has got to have a disciplinarian. If we see that there are that many pranks and crimes being committed in just 48 hours, kind of got a point. And I think he is right that he is not much of a disciplinarian. I've talked in earlier episodes about how Gabe Kaplan was learning on the job to be an actor, and he was not very good at yelling. He's getting better. I think this has some of his best acting so far, and not just the angry moments. And he does get to, of course, play different emotions and facets. Kotter says that he knows that being Mr. Woodman is a rotten job, but somebody's got to do it. So the implication is that Mr. Woodman is the most qualified to be Mr. Woodman, and Kotter doesn't want this job. Then Kotter opens his top drawer again. Woodman looks down and sees the missing yellow chalk. The four main sweat hogs and Rosalie are trying to sneak out, but Woodman tells them to freeze. He thinks that they, including Kotter, were all in on it, meaning the theft of the yellow chalk. In the pilot, we had Mr. Woodman feeling like even though Kotter is 10 years older, he's still a sweat hog. This episode, it kind of realigns. He's trying to see Kotter as a peer and go to his house and socialize with him, but finding out that his precious chalk is in Kotter's desk makes him put Kotter back in the sweat hog category in a bad way. Kotter suggests that Woodman quiet down and conduct a calm, rational investigation. Woodman yells that he is totally calm. He is dealing with sweat hogs, and one approaches sweat hogs with an iron fist of authority, so he's going fully back to disciplinarian. And that includes a sweat hog disguised as a teacher. Kotter and the sweat hogs. Ooh! You can hear Freddie laughing off camera as Woodman tells Kotter that he wants every stick of that chalk returned to his office with a written explanation. He calls them a pack of howling baboons again, and he orders them to their next class. And he sarcastically says, come on, boogie! This definitely is a callback and a runner. The students file out, definitely not boogieing, as the theme song starts for some reason. Then it fades out as Woodman closes the door and smiles. Kotter stands, and Woodman says he is good at being Mr. Woodman. Kotter says he is. He's the worst, meaning he's so good at being Mr. Woodman that he's the worst human being, I guess. Woodman says he really missed him, meaning himself. Kotter says he did too. And he says, welcome back, Mr. Woodman. So not quite a title drop. There are definitely some episodes early on where we get a reference to the title of the episode, but not here and not in Whodunit, technically. Woodman turns stern again and tells Kotter to wipe that smile off his face. Woodman's back in town. He exits and the theme starts again. Kotter smiles, shakes his head, and starts to put a textbook in his briefcase. I guess just has to do some sort of business as they fade out. In the tag, the Kotters are eating chocolate cake, and now they have yellow placemats, white plates with brown rims, and yellow glasses. So continuing the thing that they love yellow and brown at their meals. Gabe starts to tell a joke about a guy walking into a bar, and Julie asks what guy. Normally she just lets these things unfold, but she's starting to resist a little bit. Gabe says it doesn't matter. The guy ordered a total of 10 martinis, and it turns out half of them were for the talking mouse in his pocket. Julie is very amused, even in the middle of the joke. So the opening joke was one that falls into the category of being about Kotter's family, but revealing things about him and Julie as well. The tag joke is more just a standard corny joke. I didn't find that joke that funny, but I did find much of this episode surprisingly hilarious. It just got to me early on, and I found it very funny. And then more on reflection, I thought, oh, this is sort of interesting from a character standpoint. It definitely is an early episode, but you can start to see things solidify. We already have Mr. Woodman established as the antagonist, so then when we flip that, and he becomes the nice guy, and Kotter has to compensate, there's enough there that we can take it and appreciate it. And we have the journey to how Mr. Woodman decides to loosen up on Kotter's advice, and with the help of a few screwdrivers. In a way, with sitcoms, particularly of that era, things are episodic. Character development can be kind of uneven and sketchy, and at times it will regress. What you usually get in a sitcom is there's the craziness, and then we're back to status quo. And that sort of happens here, but I would argue that this did have an impact on both Kotter and Woodman. In later episodes, we get much more of Woodman making jokes. They are often rather cruel or even sadistic, but he is making jokes, and we don't get that so much in the episodes previous to this. That is a change, that he will at least try and amuse himself. And then there will also be more, I guess you could say, human moments when he's connecting, particularly with Gabe and Julie, and we start to get a little bit of that here. And Kotter wants to be the lenient teacher, the pal, but he also already knows that he needs to yell at the sweat hogs, and it's never very comfortable for him. I think Kotter or Kaplan, but he learns from this experience, and nobody suggests that they meet in the middle, which is another thing that happens sometimes on sitcoms, that maybe Woodman needs to loosen up and maybe Kotter needs to straighten up a little bit, and I don't just mean slouching in the chair. We'll see how this affects things. And yeah, I really did like that we had another episode with Julie playing hostess, and what does that look like, and how does she help Gabe smooth things over when he's socializing, I guess. There's that, and of course all the stuff happening in the school, and a heavy use of the hallway. And I think that makes sense, because some of these things have to be in not exactly no man's land, but a more neutral space, I guess, than the classroom, where anybody in the school can show up in the hallway. People can be in the middle of various activities. So we get that. And then we also, of course, get the scenes in the classroom. There are the different interpersonal dynamics going on and some actual teaching, which is kind of refreshing, actually. So I really like that. I'm giving each of these episodes a letter grade, like in school, so from F- up to A+. Although I have enjoyed most of the episodes that I've seen so far, this one just really hit me right. So I'm going with my first A-. I wouldn't say it's a perfect episode. It is a little bit unbalanced in that there's more about the adults than the kids, not so much of the individual moments. But I did like that we got the pack of Vinny, Freddie, Juan, Arnold, and Rosalie. That was a fun quintet to see how that plays out, as well as, of course, some fun support from the extras. I like that, but yeah, not so much of, oh, here's, for instance, Juan's note signed Epstein's mother. There wasn't really as much of individuals standing out for the students. Not a perfect episode, but certainly very enjoyable and very thought-provoking. With each of these episodes, I'm choosing a head of the class. That is the character that I most enjoyed watching in the episode. Like, I thought Judy was great and her little bit, but not enough to pick her. And it doesn't have to be the central character, but I do feel that Mr. Woodman made this episode. It's not just that it's about him. He was thoroughly entertaining to watch and very funny, not just stuck in his usual role, but kind of exploring that. We also found out a little bit about his backstory with his anecdotes about previous visits. I thought that Yannick's script was really strong. I thought that it was well plotted. I like that there are lines that are callbacks, including how Woodman and Kotter end up quoting each other consciously or not, and the boogie boogity thing was fun. We'll see if anything else in season 1 hits this height. But I'm just really happy that we got here so early. And yeah, there's still room for growth. We'll see if I give out any A's or A pluses. Next time, I'll be discussing episode 7, which is an episode I remember fondly from the time because we at last get Verna Jean. And in fact, it is about her relationship with Freddie. It is called Classroom Marriage. I hope to have back my special guest star, Lisa Fernandez, if scheduling permits. But either way, it will be an interesting episode to revisit. In the meantime, relax, have a few drinks, a nice dinner, and some quiet conversation with friends.
Tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back.